Hello, this is Casey Jackson with the Communication Solution Podcast. And today I have a special guest here. Got Shawn Adame, who's listened to the podcast, which is awesome. He's one of, I think, 6 of you out there that listen to the podcast, maybe a few more than that. And has been through quite a bit of motivational training. It's part of their organization that he works with and is pretty infused with his management team. And Shawn, I think the thing from you and I talking and then seeing you in the training recently that I've been doing around crisis response with responders, I'm just curious what are the things that are kind of kicking around in your brain, or what are the things that you want to dive deeper into or explore a bit more from
Yeah.
how you know and look at an application? Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, what my big draw or curiosity is, excuse me, is the mindset versus skill set concept. And I've been thinking about a lot about that even prior to the training as I've been looking back. Um, like how does that I think a lot of people have the skills of or components or ingredients of MI and really what is that next step? Like how do I embody MI? Like how does it become me? And I think initially I was like, oh, if I get more interaction with Casey, like I did your Be the Change training as well, and I can be around somebody who I think embodies MI, like I can learn what that is, like what does that look like? Um, and then in the training, it's been dawning on me more, like it's really a shift in your mindset, like my beliefs and about people and humans, and maybe that's the extra spark that can take that further to embody it versus it just being skills.
It's so on point, and it's probably been within the last maybe 2 years that I've emphasized that so much more. What you're talking about is exactly what clicked for me when we worked on the Mica coding tool. Was that whole section that I always talk about with the intentions? Is it really dawned on me that if you're not just trying to pass the test and prove that you can do motivational interviewing, like, do I have the right ratio of questions to reflections? Do I know how to strategically respond to sustained talk and change talk? When John and I would code sessions and do coaching, he'd always float one back to me going, God, this is so fascinating because it's so technically motivational interviewing, but it's like listening to have somebody read the lyrics and there's no music in the background. Like
Mm,
there's a lot that's just missing to that. And that to me is what mindset is about. And I can dive really deep into why I think that impacts change and how it impacts brain. But those are the things that I think of is that you and I are on the same page. I think mindset is so critical when we look at motivational interviewing.
yeah. And I think that's where for me, I'm like, how do I embrace or embody that? And I think there's these little nuggets that I've picked up that will allow me to be able to do that. But that is something that again, I want to become that. Even the book that you recommended, I just pulled it open today. Um, and I don't want to say you recommended it, but it's talking about underlying beliefs about human nature. And and it says people's natural predisposition is collaborative, constructive, and trustworthy. At least when given supportive conditions for change, people typically move in a positive and pro-social direction. And I was thinking about that's a belief that I think I have, and I also want to embody and incorporate it more into my life and try to think about it more often than not, because I think that either consciously or subconsciously that does impact then how we use motivational interviewing. Because if we, in my mind, if I don't really believe people could change, but yeah, I'm using these skills, am I is that going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, that won't happen because I really truly don't believe it? So
Well, and I think why that fits so well is like when you and I, the very first time you and I met, you were just kind of saying, how you came into MI and that so many people say, Shawn, it just sounds like you do MI naturally. And you're like, I don't think I do, but I get what you're saying. And so I think that is partly, like you said, the mindset when you're listening. I know you're reading the Miller and Moyer's book around, clinician attributes that improve outcomes. I guess the reason why this is so clear to me is that if your mindset is there, your language tends to follow.
Hmm.
It's the same thing when you're talking about self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm doing quite a bit of work with child welfare right now and child protective service workers, and there are some people that just think these parents should not have these children. And
Hmm.
so, and what we know with things like confirmation bias is what you see is probably what you're going to get more of. And what
Hmm.
you choose not to see, you're not going to see, you're not going to see, which is all mindset. And versus, do we think that all people are basically good or that they have the capacity to change? And that correlates directly with how we measure the intention of supporting autonomy and activation in motivational interviewing is, like I tell people, you can't pretend these things. Do you
Hmm.
genuinely believe that human beings have the right to choose what happens in their life and they get the benefits or the consequences of those choices? Do they have the fundamental human right? And some people may not believe that. That's just something in an MI mindset. We believe that it is your right to choose. It is your right to choose to do drugs. It's your right to choose how you parent. And there's going to be benefits or consequences based on your choices. And for me, subsequently, why focus is so important is, and are your behaviors getting you that which you want?
Hmm.
you know so I think that's part of that mindset as a practitioner really does set us up for where is my head at. The contradiction, and you've heard me talk about this a lot, even this recent training, is it is so contrary to more of a Western medical model, which is
Right.
it's so much about the professional assessing it, identifying the problem, and then dictating what the treatment recommendations are. And like I say, that's fine if it's a broken bone or a disease, but when it comes to behavior change, that model is not particularly effective, and data shows that.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's something that really has stuck out to me is like, again, like we seek out expert advice and we expect people to tell us exactly what to do. But with behavior change, that's significantly different. It's the person that we're working with is the expert. They know themselves better than we do and helping them figure out what they would like to do, giving them that choice, that option. And you talked about like exploring their mind with the flashlight, like you're inside of their brain, but you're flashing things at them or bringing things to their attention. Um, and then allowing them to explore that if they'd like, or they're like, hey, I don't like that you're shining that flashlight inside of my brain in that spot. Can we move the flashlight over here? Um,
That's exactly.
and I and I think that impacts their own mindset. I even
Yes.
when we were talking about doing the podcast, um, and now you were like, "Do you know what you want to talk about?" And I was like, "I don't know." Like, there was like a level of like nervousness there, and you provided me a reflection um, that I don't know if it was like an amplified reflection, but you said something, and I don't know if this is exactly what you said, but maybe I interpreted it this way, like, oh, like you know everything about MI, like there's nothing that you have questions about, and like whether that was like a subconscious part of my brain or not, but I was like, like no, but I can see how like I'm coming off sounding like that, like that's not true, and then but it forced my mindset to shift and change, and allowed me to like there are things that I like to talk about that I am curious about. And then it like opened up it was like you shined a flashlight into my brain somewhere else and I was able to like look there like, oh, look it, I didn't even know this was here. This is what I want to talk about. So
Well, and I think that from just getting to know you a little bit, Sean, recently, what I can tell you is that for myself, and I don't know if it gets triggered for you, but there is this whole reality about the imposter phenomenon. So
hmm.
I think people that are around people that know motivational interviewing, I know I get nervous sometimes thinking, do I know as much as I think I know about motivational interviewing?
Yeah.
I know a lot about it, but do I know everything about it? And then it gets into, I think that's why I'm so obsessed with brain science, is
Hmm.
because so much of language, you can't completely just, pull all language away from brain science and how communication works. So it's almost like it's this, you can't know everything about it. And so whatever rabbit hole we go down is going to be fascinating and interesting because somebody somewhere is curious about some of the same thoughts and curiosities that either one or both of us have. And I love
Yeah.
that. That is like never boring.
Right. Well, I think um I separate from the brain science, like yes, I think that's important. And I just wanted to like backtrack my thoughts to the mindset, and something that for me I feel like is important, and you shared this in your Be the Change training, was your own personal mission and vision statement. And then yesterday when we were talking, you talked about a mission and vision statement for your own organization. And I was like, oh, like
Yeah.
that's super cool. And I, for me, that ties into mindset, like your beliefs. And I don't know if that's something that you share with a lot of people. I know you had typed it up.
Yeah.
And I think you shared like, this is the first time I've shared that, but like for me, it was cool to like get insight into like, okay, someone who I see or think, and separate from your own imposter syndrome, as
Yes.
like an expert in motivational interviewing, like this is what they believe. Um, and so how can I align my thoughts more personalized to myself, but like kind of get in alignment with somebody who I see as an expert in MI, like where can I grow towards thinking and believing the way they believe, and not like in a cult like way, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna follow like
Yeah.
all the beliefs that Casey Jackson has, and I'm gonna, I'm not like that, but like
Yeah.
where can I take from that, and how can I implement that into like my beliefs about humans, about people, about myself? Um, and so
Sean, go
sorry,
ahead.
I was
No,
like, maybe you could. I think people, if they think like me or they're curious about you, like would be interested in also hearing like your mission and vision. And then I my follow-up question, I was like, man, like what's his mission and vision for IFIOC? Like I want to hear that. Like so.
well, I think I get these little sparks when tumblers fall into place, and what's happened for me in my life and my career, just from the mental health, the substance use side of it, working in law enforcement, working in all these different fields I've been able to work in and then train in with MI, is when the tumblers click, especially on the MI side of it or the neuroscience side of it, the brain science side of it. I don't want to be, as in my personal life, I don't want to be identified by my job. Like, you
Mm,
want to be Sean the social worker or Sean the supervisor or Sean the, it's like program manager. It's like, oh my gosh, that's such a thin slice of who I am. But we work many hours a day in our culture, in mainstream
hmm
American culture. People work, they're quote unquote, 35 to 40-hour weeks. And some of us work 45 to 60-hour weeks,
yeah.
and that becomes our identity. And that was for me when I started thinking about vision, mission, values, because we can talk about it, like you and I are having, having lunch or whatever, and it's like, how do you see yourself? It's sad when people just define themselves as their job or just their
hmm
role as a parent or a spouse. Like there's such a dimensionality to us, and I think that was for me when I started years ago, started writing, really taking a vision and mission statement seriously. That vision and mission statement is not my job. It's not my parenting. It's not my friendship. It's who am I as a human being, and where do I want to
hmm
be when it's all said and done and my life is at its end? Have I
yeah.
climbed towards the peak of my mountain, and not the peak that other people have defined for me as my children or my spouse or my colleagues or coworkers, or like, who am I and is my behavior in line with my values? Because I think I was so profoundly impacted by the deeper understanding of motivational interviewing that that's what we're trying to orchestrate in other people. So how can we orchestrate in other people if that's not how we live our own life? Because I have this vehemently allergic reaction to being a hypocrite. Like it just rattles things inside me that just is so incongruous with who I am as a person. So I think that's why I love how much you've picked up on the whole mindset side of it, just in your own observations, because if your mindset is there and you get your behavior to follow your own mindset, if you have a clear vision, that mission becomes clear. If you have a vision of who you want to be and how you want to be, in an MI brain, your behavior is either in line with that or your behavior is not in line with that. And when it's not in line with it, it's going to generate resistance talk and sustain talk. And
hmm
what we're trying to orchestrate is change talk and commitment talk. So it's not a therapeutic intervention. I mean, that's a way of being. You even mentioned that earlier already today, in terms of, it's almost this way of being or the way that you show up, or how you are with people. And that is exactly what some of the leaders in MI thinking have always talked about. It's not a therapy, it's a way of being with people.
hmm Yeah. No, I like that, and I also appreciate like the separation of like your identity and like of like your job and like who you are. I think about that all the time, uh, in like small ways. I have like this like goal of mine that like I try to like not let people know like what I do for work when I meet them. I'm like I want to like see how long I can like keep it without them knowing what I do because I want them to enjoy being around me for like who I am as a human versus like what I do, whether that's like a social status um, or anything. And even in like small, like weird ways, like even like if someone asks me my name, I usually try to refer to myself as saying like my name is Sean versus saying I am Sean.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I'm like, I am me. Like this is getting to like super existential. Um,
No,
but and so I think that that mindset piece is that part of like this is embodying who you are versus like what you're doing. Like and that's where a lot of people are like, oh, you're doing motivational interviewing to on me or but it's really like again more of who you are as a human versus what you're doing as a human.
I've got to tell you what backs that up in the another little splinter of the MI world is I can tell you that's the reason why it has taken so long and still hasn't happened. Why people are not certified as MI practitioners.
Hmm.
So they finally got into a place where you can be certified as an MI trainer. But the big, when you just talk about that existential crisis, I think of Dr. Teresa Moyers when I've heard her talk about this and asked about this. What she said is because it's like, well, when they passed the MITI, the Motivational Treatment Integrity Scale, MICO is our offshoot of that.
Hmm.
Um, what she said was, well, that doesn't mean that they're an MI practitioner. It means that on this sample that we just gained a sample of, that they showed they were using motivational interviewing. That doesn't certify them as an MI. I don't know if they're doing that every day. I don't know if they just did that for this tape.
Right.
So it's that same kind of parallel process that you're thinking about as well too, in terms of just because I demonstrate it doesn't mean I'm it. Just because this is my name or this is my job or this is my belief system, that doesn't make it me. So how can we call it a certified MI practitioner if we don't know if they use it when they're supposed to use it? Which gets into a place where it doesn't line up with almost every certification that exists in professional realms. But I think that's the level of integrity that you were bringing up for yourself, that there's a thread of that integrity through the MI world, through the
Yeah.
organization.
Well, I think it speaks like it it's unhypocritical of itself. Like in my mind, like am I the goal of it is to elicit somebody's intrinsic motivation. And I think like that demonstrates like you need to be doing it intrinsically. It's like not like these benchmark, like you're not doing it for that extrinsic validation of being certified MI practitioner. Um, and I think that's cool that it like it's practicing what it preaches in a way. Um,
Yes.
and it's a system or a program or not, it's a method of communication.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know that it just but I think like sometimes like we seek that or we want that. I think about people in school, like in grad school, some of my cohort was like, hey, like what do I need to do in order to get an A? And it was so like extrinsically motivated versus like there were other students there that were like, hey, I'm excited to learn some about, you know, the counseling world, counseling skills, profession, ethics, all that stuff. And there's a difference between like people who just have the skills and graduate from the program and maybe got good grades, but they're not great clinicians or practitioners. And there's people who maybe still got good grades and but also like embody or somebody who's a great counselor. Um,
It just clicked in my brain when you said that. There's two things that struck me. I think because when, like I said, when John and I were coding different tapes, or he and I share different ones with each other just out of curiosity and our own development and coding skills, like I said, there's the difference between the artist and the technician when we listen to certain tapes. Like there's ones
mhm,
that just the artistry of empathy and compassion is so woven into the fabric of who they are as a person, and you can just feel it. And then we listen to people that are so technically precise in how they operationalize motivationing, and it's measurably on all the metrics for measuring that they don't have to do with intention. They are just 5 out of 5, like exceptional. But those are, I know John struggles with those most. Those are the ones we tend to share with each other. It's like, oh my gosh, on every of the measurable indicators for strategically responding and the technical sides, they're just masters. But there's things that are really missing in these intentions you can just feel. It's
Hmm.
just there's an absence, and that's how we keep clarifying the decision trees for coding things, because we can't code it on how we feel. There has to be a metrics to it, so it can't just be, yeah, we don't feel good about that. But when I step back from it, I think as a human being myself, who would I prefer to talk to? Not the technician. When it comes to behavior change, I'll be clear. When it comes to behavior change and me finding out who I am, I will take the ones that have the intention and the mindset over the technicians, because I
Hmm.
feel deeply seen and heard and understood by the other human being, and that fits my style. But if I was going to have, God forbid, brain surgery, then I'd rather have the technician. I don't care if they have empathy and compassion. If they're technically phenomenal, I will take the technically phenomenal person that has to do a technical skill over something that has to do with the human dimensionality and fostering and facilitating behavior change or growth.
Yeah. Yeah. Which that you don't want to have any errors. Um, and I think that's where like MI lends to is that the human aspect and that is that we were watching that video um, of the police officer utilizing MI, and I was like, and in my mind, even though there was like mistakes, like they were able to catch themselves and go back to it. And I thought like that's like the beauty of it. And then I went back to like your chef versus um like what was the other person? Chef and
Just the
something. Say that
just the
again.
grandma, the
Yeah,
recipe,
grandma's
just the
recipe and then like the chef, but like the chef, I think of a chef as like an expert person versus anybody cooking. And I don't know a
yes,
whole lot about chefs, but in my mind, I'm like, I think what makes a chef great is that they're so in tune like with the food and it's a part of them in a sense that if they do make mistakes, like they can make adjustments and tweaks
yes,
that are
yes,
necessary. Like, oh, I'll add a little bit of more salt or flour. Like it doesn't have to be like this rigid recipe or even like people who are great at art or like when you're painting on a canvas, I'm sure that there's mistakes that they make, but they can tweak and like roll with the mistakes that they make. And so that's what I appreciate about the police officer, and I think that's what I like about what you're saying is with behavior change and MI. Like if you have that mindset, like it's okay to not be perfect at MI all the time because you can adapt and adjust based on of like what you're assessing in that moment.
well, and the beauty in that book that you're reading, the clinician attributes or psychotherapist attributes one, the beauty of it is that outcomes are most associated with the interpersonal skills, not by the model or technique that you're using. I mean, so just to see that so established and so rooted in decades and decades and decades of research that have been analyzed, that it comes back to how do you operate and who you are as a human being and how you communicate with other people are the are the highest correlations with other human beings changing behavior. Like that's just fascinating. And again, it for the most part that flies in the face of what we're raised in the US in a Western medical model, which is, there's the assessment piece and the intervention from an expert. And in motivational interviewing, it's, yeah, you're not, what you're an expert at is listening. And it's one of the things in my personal life that people are like, you're so good at what you do, or, you're so smart, or all these things. And I know I'm not that smart. I really do know I'm not that smart. What I
Hmm.
do give myself credit for is I listen really, really well. I listen above my head. I listen to what people say. So I'm a really good listener and a synthesizer. I'm not particularly smart. And
Hmm.
so it's the same things that it's like, well, I know what my skill set is. And my skill set is I can listen past words. Like my brain can do that. And that's
Hmm.
extremely helpful, which comes across in a different way. And I think that's what leans so much into the efficacy of where behavior change comes from, is that that's so far beyond technical. It's your interpersonal skills, or the way that you see people or listen to people or interface with human beings or other people, that really is where you see shifts in behavior, or good or bad, in our
Yeah.
interface.
Yeah. I think that's from an outside perspective, like it's hard for people to explain that or understand like what goes on. So it's like, oh, it's easier to just like Casey's so smart or he does it. But there is a lot of like stuff deeper in within like your mindset and who you are that goes into that behind that. Um, but we just, we're I'm looking at like not a finished product, but like more of like a finalized product versus
Yeah.
like all the work. I think you've mentioned, I don't even know where I heard you say this, like you've done 10,000 hours of, training and motivational interviewing. Like, again, like you've had a whole lifetime of this. Um, but from an outside perspective, it's like, oh, this is just what it is. Like Casey's just smart. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, and I
Yeah.
think
Until they
it's
know it's not that smart. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I think it's one shifting towards that mindset, and then also developing it, and then knowing that that also takes time, like just like a chef or anybody. Um, and again, I don't know if it's like the practice of the skills, because there was another quote in the book that's like, practice isn't going to make somebody um, better. That was a terrible quote. You could probably quote that better, but I think it's just like a development of like a being over time.
Well, and it's when there was so much thought we put into the striations within the mica of measurement, from the 1 to the 2, the 2 to the 3, the 3 to 4, and 4 to a 5. And one of the reasons that I was really wanted to focus on the difference between a 4 and a 5, which is competent MI to proficient MI, is because I wanted there to be this component that moves from quality assurance to quality improvement. And those are
Mm,
kind of the catchphrases, but it was more from the way you and I are talking about this. It's like I wanted people like you who, no matter how good you are at MI, you want to be able to submit a session and go, and how can I continue to improve?
yeah.
It's going to be harder and harder to improve strategically responding, because once you master strategically responding, you're mastering strategically responding. But mastering those 5 intentions of supporting autonomy and activation, like there's always ways we can get better at guiding people more effectively and going deeper into empathy and learning how to evoke more skillfully. Like that is, to me, for me, has been a lifelong learning process, and I get better and better and better at it. And if I submitted a session today using motivational interviewing and gave it to John and told John, code this and give me feedback, John would give me feedback today. And I've been doing
Hmm.
it for 25 years. And so the fact that you can always get better, or you've seen me deconstruct some of the best, like Terry Moyer's tapes or Phil
Hmm.
Miller's tapes, there's always things that we can improve. A, it's very easy to armchair quarterback. But
Right.
B, on the flip side, it means that there's things that we can always improve as well too. So to be able to master that in the moment and get feedback, and to master that in the moment means that your mindset has to be there first, but it does have to be linked with skill set. And I think of this, I remember this plenary session that Dr. Moyers was on a panel for the Mint Gathering, Motivation Mint Gathering in San Diego, decade ago, more than a decade ago. And the whole breakout session, that plenary session, was on the royal marriage between empathy and guiding. Like there's a marriage between being empathetic, but you have to be able to have technical skill as well too to guide it towards solution. It can't just be empathy, and it
Hmm.
can't just be guiding. There has to be. She talked about this royal marriage between the two constructs, between the technical side and the and aspects of what they called the globals back in the day.
Well, that's really cool, and I think that is so true. It's like it's not one or the other. It's really about
Mm-mm.
the marriage of that. Um, this is just popping into my head. I watched this documentary about Peyton Manning, um, something about like quarterback school or something. It was a summer camp. It was like a 30 by 30 or something like that. I think, hey, he's a great quarterback, but he's there sitting there watching film of himself, um, and like looking at ways that he can improve and like basics and like different aspects of his game, from like snapping the ball and dropping back. Um, and I think that's just so cool that somebody who, again, from an outside perspective, we might see as an expert or as proficient at something or a master, is willing to go back and still be aware that, hey, like there are still areas of improvement and growth for me, and I can go back and study my tape, or I can submit a coding, and John can still provide me with some feedback of like how I could do better, how I can improve. Um, and I think that's what makes somebody great, is that they're willing to always be constantly growing or looking for how can I communicate more effectively and help people with their behavior and their outcomes.
And I think there's something kind of electric and exciting about the fact that after, 35 years in social work, I can grow until I choose not to be doing these things anymore. Like literally every day I can get better and better and better. Like it's mathematically impossible to stagnate for me professionally. And there's just
Hmm.
something that's electric about that for me that just literally gets me giddy and excited inside to think that we can continue to get better and better and better, and that I'll never get there, but I'm climbing. I get closer to that top of my mountain every day, which is what a good vision statement is that you get closer and closer, whether or not you'll ever achieve it, but you just get closer and closer. And you have the guidance to be able to do that, and kind of your own mission on
Yeah.
how you accomplish that is just, that's mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
This has been awesome, Sean. I just appreciate this so much.
Oh, you're welcome, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I think this is a thought that I had, and it was a question for you. Would you say, or could you say that like identifying like someone's top of the mountain, like that is their mindset, or is
Oh
that
my
like,
god, this will be a whole other podcast. So I'll tell you, for all the training that I've provided for you all, I would say yes. Because of knowing the way that you're intrigued with motivational interviewing, what the terminology between John and I, because we dive so deep into this over the years, is I came up with the term "the clouds above the top of the mountain."
okay,
Um, so for your answer to your question is yes, the top of the mountain is kind of those things that guide. Um, but when you're talking existential, that's where I get into, and then I've got my clouds above the top of the mountain that I try to pay attention to too, or what's above the clouds above the top of the mountain.
hmm,
Um, so on just a different level. So on that human interactive level, like you're bringing up, then definitely it is the top of the mountain. But if you go a little existential, then it's like, okay, if I was going to shoot past that, where
yeah,
am I looking? So,
yeah.
which is,
So I'm
yeah.
hearing that we're going to be getting a new Focus Mountain sheet soon with clouds in it now.
No, that will probably never happen. That's more of a Casey Vision mission
There-
values kind of thing on it. Yeah. Than the world according
Well,
to MI.
yeah. Well, with that, I think that's also cool then, because if that is like mindset, then what we're also doing is, you know, with having a mindset of, or improving our mindset and how we practice MI, like we're also kind of like helping people identify their own mindset, um, which to me is really cool. I don't even know how to explain that further, but
Well, it's the
um,
whole thing we talk about. And that is the whole part about building self efficacy and personal agency. And I think this is why I get so excited about linking this to trauma and how do we move beyond trauma and help people get back, provide any facilitation so people can be the best version of themselves as they define themselves. Like that to me is everything you're talking about in that. And that we can develop a communication set, mindset and skill set that we can develop that we help orchestrate that for another person. Like that's mind blowing to me. Like
yeah,
literally, it makes me feel back into my high school years of wanting to be a counselor. It's like, I cannot believe I can get paid money to help people be the best version of themselves. Like there's got to be a trick here like that. You can't make money helping people be who they want to be. But then I look around at self help and I think, oh, there's billions of dollars in people helping people be who they want to be. Like that's, yeah.
definitely.
So it still mind boggles me that it can be such a wonderful and giddy feeling, to be able to help orchestrate that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's definitely something that is rewarding and enjoyable. And like also like reassuring. It's like I think what we do with MI, like sometimes we don't see that outcome, but it's kind of like that end of like, hey, you're showing somebody who's like, I think I have this on my own now. Like I don't need you anymore. And like we don't get to see like the finalized product, but I think we get to see like this person who does feel empowered to like, okay, I can take this on my own now. And yeah,
Well, and I think the thing that's so awesome about that, Sean, is when we look at it as a method of communication, that every single interface you had, and I think this goes back to like, the crisis training a few days ago, no matter what it is, whether you're a therapist, a clinician, psychotherapist, if you use this method of communication, there's such a solidity when you walk away from every conversation knowing, I know that I orchestrated everything that I could orchestrate in this conversation to help this person out. So if it's just a one time phone call from a 988 call to, no matter what the interface is, or a brief therapy session or a conversation with a friend or family member that they only chose to open it up to you one time and really kind of let it all out, to know that what you did in that moment was what we know is some of the best communication you could possibly use to get to the best outcome, whether you ever see them or talk about this topic again. There's something extremely comforting in knowing that in every conversation, instead of all these V8 moments of going, God, what should I have said that? Should I have said something different? Could I say something differently? That can plague
Hmm.
us in these really complex conversations and human conditions we run into.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, we need to wrap up. So this was we. If you ever want to come back on again, we definitely can pick up from here.
I'm like,
Again,
be
this has been
careful
awesome.
what you're asking for. Like, you're
That,
manifesting it. Like, all like
that
that's in
works
my
for me.
mind. Like, I'll be here every week.
Awesome. So same thing. This is I love having Sean on here. Like we tell people every single time, the whole point of the podcast is to talk about things that are most interesting to you. So if you ever want to come on or have questions or topics you want to talk about, just email at Casey at ifioc.com. I hope you continue to listen, follow us, all those wonderful things. And Sean, I just have to thank you again for coming on. This was a really fun morning, so I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I feel honored. So thank you.
Yeah. I think we got it, Bahar.